If someone told you they were learning Chinese right now in the year 2023 using the Steve Kaufman method, they would mean, presumably, they would have in mind the method, the technique that he has preached for the last 11 years. The method that he has monetized through this peculiar app you can install on your phone, and not the method that he used to learn Chinese himself back in 1969.
And in the case of my Chinese, I studied for a year. I worked 7-8 hours a day, 3 hours one-on-one with the teacher, and then reading.
How many of you in the audience have the option of one-on-one tutoring with a professor of Chinese for 3 hours a day? 3 hours a day of so-called FaceTime, face-to-face training. One professor, one student, university level training. Do you have are you just turning that down so that you can learn Chinese from your phone? Did you receive a fully paid scholarship from, say, the Canadian Diplomatic Service? Did the government of Canada offer you a blank check and a limited budget to learn Chinese? And you're like, no, I'm going to go with this Steve Kaufman method. I'm not going to learn Chinese the way he did. I'm going to learn Chinese the way he said I should. I'm just going to relax and use this app on my phone for 1 hour a day. 3 hours a day, face-to-face training, not in a classroom, not in a lecture hall, not studying and then filling out a multiple choice test when the professor plays a fucking CD-ROM of audio clips for you to pick A, B, C, D. No. 3 hours a day of face-to-face coaching, direct coaching, one teacher, one student, in the most privileged position a student could possibly be in, including the fact that he's motivated by the promise of a prestigious, high-paying job at the end of it if he can just stay focused, stay disciplined, do the work, and get the results. 1969.
And in the case of my Chinese, I studied for a year. I worked 7-8 hours a day, 3 hours one-on-one with the teacher, and then reading, listening, and then for a year and a half after that, I went in and out of China. I went to the Canton Trade Fair twice a year, and I had to interpret for Canadian business people. And I traveled to China, and I spoke a lot.
Just tell me something. Do you think the level of Chinese spoken by Steve Kaufman is impressive for someone who had that 1 year of education? Because I don't. With absolutely no other factors under consideration. Just the narrative he told you right now, which is approximately, let's say at the most generous, 1968 to 1970, something like that. Maybe 67, 68, something like this. The late 1960s through to calendar year 1970. Let's not even include in the calculus that he met and fell in love with and got married to a Chinese woman while he was living in Hong Kong, and he's still married to her to this day. That he is married to and in a 50-year-long relationship with a woman who speaks a Chinese language as her first language. I don't know what dialect. I don't know if she speaks Cantonese. I don't know her level of ability in Beijing Hua, as we like to say. But regardless, he married a Chinese woman. Let me tell you something. If you're trying to learn Spanish and you marry someone who speaks Portuguese, it still helps. This is a Chinese woman, a resident of Hong Kong, and in fact, he has had children with her. They have raised half Chinese children, speaking both English and Chinese for 50 years. This man is more than 50 years deep into this language learning experiment. And his advice to you for how you should learn Chinese has no resemblance to his own history of learning Chinese. This is not the only version of events. There are several different written versions of his personal history. of how it is he became fluent in Chinese in his own terms. I'm telling you something, it's been 50 years. I still do not think Steve Kaufmann is fluent. I think his level of achievement in the Chinese language is, in a word, pathetic. But wouldn't it be a different thing if he weren't lying to you? If he weren't telling you that you can get better results than he's gotten, better outcomes with less work, with just relaxing and enjoying yourself. What he described there, 3 hours a day, face to face with the professor, 8 hours a day of study for 1 full year. That doesn't sound so relaxing to me, Steve. That doesn't sound anything like the methodology that you're promoting today for all languages. And we'll talk about in a moment just how pathetic his outcomes are for languages that he has studied with his own new methodology. But if you want to go back and look, again, he's written it up. He tells you exactly which textbooks he used to study Chinese in those years, both when he was in Ottawa, Canada, within his term, the diplomatic service. I noticed, Steve, that when CBC wrote about your life, they didn't say you were a diplomat. They didn't say you worked in diplomacy. They didn't even say you worked in politics. They say you had a job in import and export. You know what the fucked up thing is, Steve? I actually have more respect for people working in import and export. I would respect you more if you gave a blunt, honest description of what the work was that you did in importing and exporting, but you never describe yourself as a guy who comes out of an importing exporting background. The CBC does that because I think they fact-checked your fucking story. Okay, Steve? But regardless, I guess it just sounds more dignified for you to insinuate that you were some kind of diplomat, that your role, your job was closer to political science, my field, than it was importing and exporting. Okay? How many people in your audience would benefit from you, Steve, really being honest about what the work was, what the process was, and what results you got out of it? What a tremendous sacrifice it was, and how little you've got to show for it. And now think about how much you're harming people by inviting them to believe in what I could only call pseudoscience and even the beginnings of a new religion.
People, and I traveled to China, and I spoke a lot. Relaxing is good. I think pressure in language learning is bad for us. We can listen to interviews.
Relaxing is good. Pressure in language learning, he claims, is bad for us. You think he's going to give you a footnote? You think he's going to give you a scientific study? You think he's got verifiable, empirically real outcomes to show for this? Where do you think he's going next?
Interesting things. Not worried about what we understand, what we retain. We just enjoy the language.
Oh no, bro. Oh no, bro. No need to worry about what you understand and misunderstand. No need to worry about what you retain. Gee, I'm sorry. Didn't you learn Chinese in like the most high pressure circumstances imaginable? Like you've got pressure from your boss, you've got pressure from the diplomatic corps, the diplomatic service, the trade office, whoever it was you were really working for. Steve, okay, you've got a professor breathing down your neck. Steve, you learned Chinese using the Yale method. And I know that because you told me. I know exactly the tech. They were in the library for me and my generation too. I know exactly the course you took. I know exactly it. You did not learn Chinese with the method you promote today that you monetize today. It was a high pressure, high stress method. And you know what, Steve? I can tell that you don't speak Chinese for shit because I've studied Chinese. You know what I can't do? I can't scrutinize how badly you speak Arabic. But Arabic is a really telling example because you learned Arabic within the last 7 years. And you learned Arabic using your bullshit method, your bullshit app, following your bullshit philosophy. not the philosophy, not the method of your professor in Ottawa or your professor in Kowloon, Hong Kong. You made up your own rules to play by. And after 6 or 7 years, you can't speak Arabic for shit. You still literally don't know the alphabet. You still cannot pronounce the sounds within that alphabet that are outside the range for a normal English speaker. That's for you as a professed expert. You present yourself, you claim you are a linguist, you are an expert, you're a language education revolutionary world leader. And you couldn't teach yourself the basics in Arabic in 6 or 7 years. I don't know, Steve. I think people could learn Chinese the same way you did, but they can't learn Chinese the way that you are now telling them they should.
He said for slow learning without pressure. Now, this is going to upset some people in school where they feel if something was taught, therefore the student should be able to repeat it. Parents and administrators want exams and test results and grading, but all of this is putting pressure on people. Instead, what we want is an approach of slow enjoyment of the language. The end result will be better learning.
Okay, slow enjoyment of the language. You took 50 years to learn Chinese. And I've still seen no evidence of your proficiency, Steve. I've seen a lot of evidence of your lack of proficiency, your lack of ability, of how appallingly low your level of ability in Chinese is. Slow enjoyment of the process of learning the language. Where are you at in Arabic? Where are you at in Persian? Where are you at in Turkish? I know, Steve, because you told me. Your wife isn't calling me up and telling me your secrets. I know from your fucking direct testimony, from your evidence, you have accomplished jack shit. Here's the problem. We have two methods being contrasted, right? One focuses on relaxing and enjoying the learning, or relaxation and enjoyment. We can measure that. Maybe people will be happier if they use your method, Steve. Maybe. We can always say maybe. That's a hypothesis to be tested, because maybe some people would feel unhappy if they could only speak, read, and write Chinese at your level after 50 years. Maybe some other people would be unhappy if they can only speak, read, and write Arabic at your level after 6 or 7 years, right? Maybe they'll be unhappy with the outcomes and unhappy with themselves, especially if they spent a huge amount of money, if they have a huge opportunity cost, if there are huge losses they've incurred in this attempt to learn to speak this language. It's a high-stakes game. People's lives really are ruined by bad advice, by bad guidance in education. But notice how casually he refers to the superiority of the outcomes if you use his relaxing method as if it were an established fact, as if there's no onus on him whatsoever to prove that, let's be blunt, to prove that learning language without suffering, without striving, without effort, that won't just make you happier, that it's actually more effective.
For slow learning without pressure. Now, this is going to upset some people in school where they feel if something was taught, therefore the student should be able to repeat it. Parents and administrators want exams and tests and test results and grading.
So there's just no legitimate reason for that, right, Steve? So, Steve, if you were writing tests, if you were having to perform to a standard that was imposed upon you, if you were working under pressure, don't you think someone would notice you still can't pronounce this letter, this consonant sound from the Arabic alphabet? Don't you think they could catch you in that bad habit and correct you? Tests exist for a reason. Exams exist for a reason. I can't believe I'm saying this. As opposed to letting students go on their merry way, self-guided, self-indulgence, enjoy life. Just go on vacation, bro. Just be a vagabond in your language learning. How many times have you been on vacation in the Arabic speaking world, Steve? You talk about it all the time, right? I had someone write in to defend your method, Steve. And he said, well, it's a bit like playing the trumpet. It's a bit like playing the trumpet, is it? Let me tell you something. I can listen to an audio CD of another man playing the trumpet for 8 hours a day and never learn how to play the trumpet. I can go to a jazz club and listen and watch a jazz musician playing the trumpet and never learn how to play the trumpet. You can have a whole life where you're surrounded by and you're entertained by and enthralled by the noise of trumpet music and both the mechanical skill in your fingers and what's going on in your brain where you understand the written symbol of the music. You translate that into a thought, you translate that into an action, the timing, how you coordinate with other instruments, what's happening moment by moment, and the fundamentals of music that are in some ways as inexpressible as a consonant sound, like getting the consonant sound dead accurate for Arabic, getting the vowel sound dead accurate for Laotian, Thai, Cambodian, some of those languages that have complex vowel sounds, and even at the level of idioms and phrases, right? In some ways, music is like playing a trumpet. But it was hilarious and bizarre to me that someone was writing in saying this to defend Steve and his method. Like, yeah, man, just relax. Just listen to some jazz music. Just enjoy your life. And you're going to learn to play the trumpet just fine. As opposed to facing up to the reality of how much hard work is involved. And frankly, the relationships of authority that are entailed by that. Now, Steve, I'm going to give you just one more example here. We can go on and on and on. Boxing. You can hang out in a gym. You can watch boxing on TV. And you know what? A lot of people back in the 1980s were like this. They watched a bunch of kung fu movies, and it made them feel invincible. It made them feel, to quote Will Smith, I remember Will Smith, they made them feel like they could walk into a room and beat up a whole bunch of people. Like one guy could beat up 7 guys because they'd seen this in movies again and again. And they felt like they could actually do the motions and moves that they'd seen in the movie. This is like a kung fu movie. Boxing, it's kind of interesting because the motions are so simple. The moves are so, well, still, okay, now you feel self-confident. You think you know how to fight. You think you know how to throw a punch. You think you know how to do a jump kick. You think you know how to plant one foot on a brick wall and propel yourself off and do a jump kick in the other direction because you've seen it again and again. You can hit pause. You can hit rewind, right? You can enjoy yourself, all right? You can't fight for shit. You have learned nothing. You have been entertained. And guys, sorry, let's finish this 30-second clip here before I move on. If there were any truth to what he's saying, there would be outcomes. There would be measurable outcomes. We would be able to look at 2 groups of students, one of whom did what Steve actually did back in 1969, 1970, this period, who worked 8 hours a day. And we would say, oh, no. Look, the amount of the language they learned is terrible because they were under all this pressure. They didn't make any progress. So this other group who just relaxed and used an application on their mobile phone and enjoyed life and just soaked up passively soaked up language content, hearing it in the background like background music. Oh yeah. They're way better. They're way more advanced. Just look at the outcomes. The outcomes speak for themselves. Steve, if your ass is on the line, if you have to fight for your life, do you want to train for 1 hour a day? Do you want to train for 8 hours a day? Do you want to train in a way that's fundamentally self-centered, self-guided, self-indulgent? Or do you want to train where you have a relationship of an authority, where there's someone standing over you telling you, no, you're doing it wrong. No, when you put your foot there, you're doing it wrong. When you move this way, do you want to learn how to box? Because in a sense, the relationship between boxer and coach, it's not like once a month you're writing an exam. It's every few seconds you're being corrected. You're being corrected in your posture and your motion. You're being told you're doing it wrong again and again and again until one day you're doing it right. All right? I'll be real with you. Playing the trumpet, boxing, kung fu, they're all easier than learning Chinese. All. And if you took it seriously, if you worked at it 8 hours a day, how much could you advance in playing the trombone in just 1 year? How much could you advance in learning the fundamentals of kickboxing? Let's say, to use a specific fighting art. Let's say Thai kickboxing. 1 year. You train 8 hours a day for 1 year Thai kickboxing. Dude, after 1 year, 8 hours a day in Chinese, you're still a beginner. And Steve Kaufmann, after 50 years in Chinese, is still a beginner.
All of this is putting pressure on people. Instead, what we want is an approach of slow enjoyment of the language. The end result will be better learning.
The end result will be better learning. Prove it. Prove it. Or is this a religion? Is this something that is fundamentally not susceptible to proof? That's not based on evidence. That's not based on measuring outcomes at all. Skepticism does not apply to all things equally. It doesn't apply to all assertions equally. It doesn't apply to every gambit equally. And it doesn't apply to all people equally. Okay? We're obsessed with the notion of equality in this country. The only people who ever criticize equality are right-wing maniacs who grew up reading Friedrich Nietzsche and decided Nietzsche wasn't right-wing enough. Great question from the audience, by the way. Someone wrote in and asked, quote, "Why don't you like Fire and Blood?" So the George R. R. Martin book. Right on topic, homie. Thanks for writing in, Joel. My favorite example of this is you have a mobile phone. You've been using the mobile phone every day for a year. You're accustomed to the rate at which the battery drains. For me, this would be especially true of when I'm at the gym. At the gym, you're kind of playing podcasts, you're doing this. I have a sense of how many hours I've got at the gym as the battery drains down. And then all of a sudden, the battery starts draining faster. So you come up with a hypothesis. Okay, here's one hypothesis. The battery is going down faster. One possible hypothesis is there's spyware, there's malware, and your phone is draining faster because it's recording your voice, it's recording video, and it's sending it to China, Russia, whoever's spying on you. I don't know. Your ex-wife, your ex-girl, somebody's spying on you. Okay? All right, so that's a hypothesis. And then we could get into the kind of skepticism. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. Okay, here's another hypothesis. I say to you, hey, I notice you used to work out at the gym just wearing tiny little earbuds. Now you've got a big pair of cans, as we say. Now you've got a big pair of these, much larger, apparently more powerful headphones. Well, those headphones don't have their own batteries. When you plug that into your phone, it's drawing its power from your phone. So it seems to me more likely, it's not impossible, your thesis, your hypothesis, seems to me more likely that when you switched headphones, now the new headphones are draining more power. Okay. I don't know for a fact that larger headphones use more electricity than small headphones, right? It seems intuitively obvious. There's a bigger speaker, but we could actually test that hypothesis, right? Like, okay, well, there's a solid suggestion. It's plausible. We have a mechanism, right? What's the mechanism of action? How could this be possible, right? And now we can pretty simply investigate how much energy does this drain over 1 hour of audio, right? And you guys probably know if you've owned a cell phone in the last several years, you're probably aware another possibility is just that your cell phone is getting old. That just the passage of time and repeated use of the battery is dying. There are some other hypotheses here, but you could test your headphones, and the big headphones, they could in theory be more energy efficient than the small headphones. Again, unlikely, but not impossible. And it can be tested. I made a couple of YouTube videos. I think maybe just 2, but at least one. I made a couple of YouTube videos that were giving you advice on how to be successful in your university classes, studying for tests, writing exams, all the things that are required to get good grades and also to really learn. I just mentioned, because some people have already written in saying that I'm not in a position to criticize Steve Kaufman because I supposedly, there's just no evidence at all of my accomplishments in language learning. In the video I made about how to study for, how to do well in university, it had my grades in the thumbnail before you even click. Oh yeah, here are my grades, course by course, for how I did in university using this method. Okay. Here's the point. Skepticism doesn't apply to everything equally. Okay. One of the main pieces of advice, and I always remember Melissa kind of freaked out when I said this. She was really surprised. Said, oh yeah, I start writing the final essay the day I received the assignment, which in most classes, sometimes it was the very first class, sometimes the second or third class, but generally right at the beginning of the course, they give you the assignment for the final essay for the major paper. And I would start researching and writing the essay that day. Now, Melissa was surprised this for different reasons, including she kind of laughed at one point. I forget if this was on camera or off camera, but she laughed and said, oh, well, that's what everyone tells you to do, but nobody does it. Again, we can kind of think about the mechanism of action here. And I told you why in the video. When you start doing the research early, when you start doing the writing early, you have time to make mistakes and compensate for them later. If you leave it to the last week, if you leave it to the last day, you've got to write the essay based on this book and this source. You've got to force the pieces to fit. You got to force it to work because you don't have time to even go back to the library and find a different book. You don't have time to make mistakes. You don't have time to go back to the drawing board. You don't have time to come with a new thesis, new idea for an essay or what have you. And when you start earlier, you get the chance to make mistakes and to learn from mistakes. It's not just about getting high grades. Okay. I'll tell you 2 things. One, nobody has ever expressed any skepticism about this method. And 2, nobody has followed it. Not a single person has ever written into me saying, oh yeah, I followed your advice and now I'm doing way better in university. I have spoken to some young people through the YouTube channel where they'd seen my videos and I gave them direct personal advice about what to do in university. None of them followed it. None of them wanted to do it. So, okay, skepticism. It doesn't apply to every claim equally. It doesn't apply to every person equally. Life is unfair. Okay, life is unequal. And what would be a skeptical reaction to that proposal? And again, I'm not explaining. I'm not connecting all the dotted lines here for you guys because, frankly, you can probably intuitively figure this out. Like how what I'm saying about studying for a university course applies to studying for languages, applies to many other things in life. What if you just said take a risk? Say, okay, well, you know what? In this course, I'm going to follow your method. I'm going to start doing the research and the writing the day I get the assignment, right at the beginning of the term. I'm going to do exactly what you said. And you know what? In this other course, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to leave it till the last minute, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to follow. Just thinking this through as a thought experiment. There's no reason to do the real world experiment. You might as well follow the method from both courses. It's so unbelievably obvious that this is going to work in one case. Hey, how about we take two identical twins? I know a pair I'm thinking of. Some of my best friends are identical twins. How about we have two identical twins, and one twin goes through all of her university courses, leaving the writing of the assignment to the last minute, and the other one follows my advice, does the first day. What? They take the same courses. They go through the same courses. How do you think that experiment is going to turn out, guys? Okay, we have a mechanism of action here, right? And we're talking about outcomes in empirical methods, right? Even if it is just as a thought experiment, we're already getting into the world of outcome evaluation. And Steve Kaufman never does this. What's happening with the polyglot subculture on YouTube? What's happening with the marketing and monetization of language education, polyglottery, being an autodidact in languages, right? To a massive extent, it's negatively impacting and ruining people's lives exactly the same way as if Steve Kaufman was giving you this advice about how to prepare for your exams, about how to learn to play a musical instrument, about how to draw, about how to paint, or how to prepare for a fist fight, whether that be in a fighting sport or a martial art or otherwise. It's terrible advice. And back when he was an employee of the Canadian government, maybe in the trade office, maybe in the diplomatic corps, it's not quite clear. Yeah, that is not advice he followed himself. And let me ask you, what if he'd had the nerve to tell his boss, no, man, this is all too much pressure. I'm not really going to learn Chinese this way. I don't really think I'm going to, 8 hours a day, including 3 hours face-to-face, one-on-one with a teacher. No, man. The best way to learn a language is just to relax and enjoy life. I'm just going to play a video game on my cell phone for 1 hour a day and, kind of go on vacation and hang out and just kind of listen to language, different contexts, kind of relax and watch TV shows. And if you go through his videos, it's like he wants you to put minimum effort into vocabulary memorization, minimum effort into the study of grammar. He's got some kind of animus against rules-based grammar learning. This also, as if it's all a big conspiracy. He said this many times in many contexts. He says that language teachers, he normally uses French as his example, that like a French teacher, they want to teach the rules of grammar because that's something they can test you on, right? This is the only reason. There's no other benefits to people learning the rules of grammar. It's so that they can do testing and evaluation. That's easy to write an exam for, unlike other aspects of language. So he's telling you all the time, don't worry about memorizing vocabulary. Don't worry about the rules of grammar. Take it easy. Enjoy your life. 1 hour a day. And what do you know? His most recent video, right? You can look at his numbers, 20,000 views. For some reason, people are lining up to hear that message. And look, fair enough. They are not lining up to hear mine. No. What is the difference between science and pseudoscience? What is the difference between education and religion? What is the difference between a legitimate service and a scam? In one word, the difference is belief. What Steve Kaufman is doing relies on and appeals to your belief again and again and again. And what I'm doing, maybe I lack the vocabulary to express this. Instead, it relies on and appeals to your unbelief, your nihilism. What would you have to believe in to really imagine that you can learn to play the trumpet just by listening to music and hanging out in jazz clubs and enjoying your life? What would you have to believe to imagine that you're going to be a prize fighter you're going to win a kung fu match, you're going to win a kickboxing match or American style boxing match by watching it on TV again and again, and by relaxing and by enjoying your life. What would you have to believe to think that you don't need to try hard? Again, I'm not just interested in getting high grades in university, but in actually learning the content, that you can leave writing the essay until the last minute and so on, instead of following my method. Well, you would have to believe that you're special. Right? And this is the most precious delusion of all. And it's the one most frequently exploited by marketers, by scam artists. Steve Kaufmann says, I've heard him say this in multiple videos in multiple contexts, every year millions of Canadians study French because they're forced to study French. Millions, right? And he normally uses the number of 10 years. I don't know if that's accurate, but he says this huge percentage of people in Canada study French for 10 years. And I just say the actual number of years, maybe it's different from city to city or province to province, but fine, let's use a round number. So millions of Canadians have 10 years of French language education. And at the end of that process, they can't speak French. They can't learn, despite all the hard work, despite the pressure, despite the humiliation, despite the relationship of authority to the teacher, despite the tests and the exams and the memorization and the grammar rules. Right? But not you. You're special. If you follow these 5 easy steps with this one magic trick, just a few hours a week, with just 1 hour a day, while enjoying your life, right? You can prove them all wrong. Your French teacher in school said you were lazy. Your professor at university said you were stupid, but they were wrong because they were using the wrong method. But you and I, we know the one true method. We're special. We are going to get the results for free and easily and with little effort that they could never get. What if Steve Kaufmann were a genius? What if he actually could learn Chinese in 1 year, which is what his Wikipedia article claimed about him as of like yesterday? I don't know if they've already rewritten it or not. What if he were an extraordinarily talented, extraordinarily brilliant man who could learn Chinese to the level of fluency in just 1 year, and who could master the Arabic language in 6 years of just casual study while relaxing and enjoying himself and listening to podcasts and watching movies, following exactly the methodology he's preaching you? It would still be terrible advice. It would still ruin your life to follow his advice. And now let me say the opposite. What if I'm an idiot? What if the reason why I had to work so hard in university and start researching and writing the paper the first day I got the assignment, instead of leaving it to the end of the semester, the end of the term, what if that's because I'm stupid and you're smarter than me? You're so brilliant, you're so talented that you can leave it to the last minute and still get good results. My advice would still make your life better. You would still improve by following the advice of a moron instead of a naturally gifted genius. You have to be more skeptical of people who present extraordinary claims and present themselves as extraordinary people. You have to be more skeptical of someone who presents themselves as a genius than you would be of someone who presents themselves as a mediocre mind or a moron, because what works for a moron will work for you. And what works for a genius, in a word, won't.